Welcome to the Filmcast review of Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire. Yes, we're aware that you're supposed to pronounce the X silently, but we're not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. You guys can decide whatever you want to do.
Yeah, don't speak for all of us, Dave.
Yeah,
I've
you're
been pronouncing the X nonstop this whole time. You just haven't heard it because it's
right.
silent.
You've been whispering it under your
It's
breath.
a silent scream, this X.
According to the internet, here's a plot summary for the movie. Godzilla and the almighty Kong face a colossal threat hidden deep within the planet, challenging their very existence and the survival of the human race. Before we get into this movie, I do just want to give a shout out to the fine creative folks over at Warner Brothers. This is the second movie that's premiered in the last couple months that has been a sequel to a movie that came out during the pandemic, that came out day and date with HBO Max. Remember Dune Part 1, Godzilla versus Kong? Both of those movies came out on HBO Max at the same time. They both still did relatively well at the box office, and then both of them had sequels come out within weeks of each other here in 2024, and they're both pretty massive hits. So bravo to keeping the theatrical film-going industry alive, and regardless of my thoughts on the movie, I am grateful that like these choices that they're making theatrically are being rewarded. All that said, why don't we start a little bit by talking about our thoughts on this MonsterVerse group of movies, which kind of the modern era started with Gareth Edwards' 2014 Godzilla, right? And we've had a bunch of MonsterVerse movies since then.
The Monarch TV show.
Yeah,
don't forget.
Monarch Legacy of Monsters TV show, right? Godzilla -1, not really part of the MonsterVerse.
Not at all part of it.
So
no, it's a whole separate verse. Yeah.
But what has been your overall thoughts on this movie and kind of your expectations leading into this one, Devindra Hardwar?
I mean, on this whole thing, like, I think it's been fascinating. Like, I remember being kind of into the original, the Gareth Edwards Godzilla, even though it was like narratively a mess. It looked amazing and had like really interesting vibes. Loved Kong Skull Island. I remember really liking the last one, Godzilla versus Kong, a very simple title, very clean. You understood what was happening there. So I was down for it. I watched a couple episodes of Monarch too, and Monarch is cool. But just, it didn't feel like there was much like to keep it going. But I love the idea of, like, I love big kaiju movies. I love Godzilla -1. Give me anything with Godzilla, like, I will at least give it a shot. I did not really like this movie very much. Like, the sad thing is, like, I see glimpses of what could be really enjoyable here. And this is just one of those movies where almost everything involving the humans just doesn't need to be there. Like, in fact, there are long stretches of this movie where there's no language or real dialogue. It's just like giant monsters fighting other giant monsters or trying to like come to realizations where it's just like monster noises, and that's kind of interesting and cool, and there's some cool storytelling happening there. But then you get back to Earth and you get back to Rebecca Hall and everything going on around her, and I just feel so displaced. Like, the only person I was really interested in this movie is Mr. Dan Stevens, who I think is doing the Lord's work in this movie. He probably the only human. Him and who is it? Him and Brian Tyree Henry, I think, are the two characters or the two actors who know exactly the movie that they're in. But the Dan Stevens introduction alone, where the movie kind of jolts to life, the score gets some 80s synth going. He is like a wild guy. I'm gonna extract a tooth from Kong. That's my job. Just like the things that didn't work with the main character from, was it the Jurassic World movies, whatever didn't work about Chris Pratt's characters there. Yeah. Like, everything I hate about that, this character is like another sort of wild, crazy adventurer, but kind of interesting, kind of kooky, kind of crazy. And I like it. So shout out to Dan Stevens for, injecting some life into this thing. Whenever Dan Stevens shows up, I feel like you're in for at least a good time in the orbit of that character. So I appreciated that. But yeah, it's outside of the stuff happening in the Hollow Earth. Like, I didn't really care much about any of the human stuff happening here. It just feels like it could have been tighter. It could have been tighter and maybe a little more focused. I see what they were going for. But I honestly was like struggling to stay awake through some of this movie, and that is never a good sign.
Jeff Kanata, what did you think about Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire?
Well, Dave, what I thought of Godzilla Kong: The New Empire.
Are you okay?
Just a mini stroke. Yeah. It's okay.
Is best summed up in the form of a limerick. Godzilla gets into some scrapes. Kong starts some fights, then escapes. But this movie's a fail because it loses its scale when it's just a Planet of the Apes. See, I have kind of the opposite take from Devindra in a lot of ways, because
but still disappointed. It sounds like. So
oh, it's terrible.
I think we agree on that.
Terrible movie. Yesterday happened to be Easter Sunday, and we were out and about with the kids. We went. There's a thing in our neighborhood where they had face painting, and you could meet the Easter Bunny and stuff. And so we're at the park. We're on the swings, and there's another parent came up to us and they said, "Oh, we're leaving early." I said, "Oh, why are you leaving early?" "Oh, I want to take the kids to go see Godzilla and Kong movie." and I went, "Oh, I'm so sorry,
man."
And she's like, "Oh, what, really?" I was like, "Oh, no, I feel bad doing that to you. You go enjoy. I'm sure it'll be fun." She's like, "Oh yeah, my 8-year-old has been so excited for weeks." I'm like,
"This is a movie made for 8-year-olds."
So bad. I think this movie is so bad, and I feel like where I feel like I'm a little bit of the inverse from Devindra is that I feel like this is a monkey paw situation, or in this case, a giant ape paw.
Yes,
they're not called monkeys. That's rude, Jeff.
Yeah, sorry. Because I have been over the last several weeks going through and compiling all of my old limericks for the book that's coming out, Best Summed Up, the ultimate limerick film quiz book, which will I think be hitting stores hopefully by the end of the year. Maybe, I don't know, we'll find out. Anyway, I've been compiling all those, been going back through all my limericks and rewriting many of them, because boy, there's some bad ones. You guys never told me how bad they were. Why didn't you guys ever mention how
we were being kind,
always
Jeff?
Such huge fans and like always congratulating me on how excellent they always were, and never had any problems with
never
the
meter
syllable structure. Yeah, right. No, never.
The rhyming, the approximate rhymes.
You guys, I don't understand. You
yep.
Anyway, I in that process read a number of my limericks for these really incessant Kong and Godzilla movies that have been coming out. There's a lot of them. The limericks have only been going on 3 or 4 years tops, and I think there's like 3 or 4 Kong limericks in there.
Yeah.
Anyway, the overwhelming takeaway I got from those limericks, revisiting them, is that I kept wanting less humans, more monsters fighting each other. The first few of these movies is like a half an hour of the giant monsters and an hour and a half of the humans. And I feel like Kong, Godzilla, or whatever it's called, this one really gave me what I wished for. There are, as Devindra pointed out, large stretches of this movie where there is nothing that has been physically photographed. It is just CG monster in front of CG environment.
Jeff, I think you mean shot on location in Hollowworth. Come on.
Shot on location in Hollowworth. I stand corrected. Pardon me.
Thank you.
But there's a lot of big things smacking other big things, which is what I said I wanted. And now here I am on the other end of this monkey paw situation going, I've made a terrible mistake.
I've made a huge, tiny mistake. Yeah.
Because there's no Frogurt with the, you know what I'm saying?
Well, you're saying there's no scale. And I agree.
There's no
I
scale.
kind of agree.
Well, that's the biggest problem. Is that what's fun about Godzilla and King Kong is, holy smokes, they're bigger than the tallest skyscraper. They can just walk right over it. And there are a couple of scenes in this movie. There's one in Egypt that is, I was like, oh, that's a clever idea to put them there.
And there's stuff in Rome that I think the Godzilla stuff has scale because he's on Earth, you know,
right. Barely
topside.
A couple of moments, but most of what happens is big stuff fighting other big stuff in big land. And it really does just look like Planet of the Apes, which is a far better franchise, far better films.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited for the next one. But you completely lose that immensity that is the selling point of the giant kaiju, is that they're giant. And you lose that. And I was really racking my brain. I've been racking my brain for days since I saw this movie, going, what is fundamentally wrong with the action here? Because I'm not going to oversimplify it and say, oh, it's just CGI thing smacking other CGI thing. I think it's a lazy critique.
There is a critique there, though. It can work, but the CGI here is weightless. It is kind of like it is not grounded. Yeah.
Let Jeff finish. You it seemed like you had an answer for that, right?
Well, I find myself thinking about, for example, The Way of Water, right? Where it's just CGI things attacking other CGI things as far as the eye can see, right? And yet that action felt so intense, edge of my seat, incredible, right? It's not simply the fact that the visual effect makes it somehow unwatchable or less than. There is something fundamental about what is happening here, how it's shot, how it's presented, how it's dramatized, whether I care about these creatures. And there's so much effort in Godzilla x Kong to really make Kong a protagonist, specifically Kong. I mean, Godzilla, not as much. Kong is really, we are supposed to be inside his thoughts moment to moment. He has little comedic sidekicks and things like that. It's pathetic, frankly, but there's a lot of effort to humanize him, to give you pathos and see inside his mind and really associate with that character. And I found it to be almost completely a failure and almost completely pandering and ridiculous and not at all interesting or fun. And then when the movie does get bombastic and loud, I mean, it's amazing that Devindra could fall asleep at all. I saw it in IMAX and it was very loud.
Snoozing during loud parts is the thing, which is sad.
It does do the Transformers thing where the giant things smack into each other a lot, but I could not for the life of me get any sense of investment. I didn't care. None of it was cool. None of it felt fun. None of it felt inventive. There's some neat things that happened. Like you can see on the page, like, oh, that is a neat idea. But in execution, it almost never felt dramatic or interesting. There's no tension created. It is a flat experience from start to finish for me. And it's such a shame because there's so much money on the screen. There's these big iconic characters that you think it should matter when they start facing off against each other, but it is so insipid. It's so bland. It's so lowest common denominator that I just had absolutely no fun with this movie. And I want to say one other quick thing before you go, Dave, and that is people who have listened to this show a long time know that for a while I have been tickled. And there's a little kernel of joy, and I bring it up frequently. Every time there's someone in a movie who has my job. Because it's kind of wild that, like, here I was doing this job that no one knew about. I had to try to talk my parents. Like, well, how do I tell my friends what you do for a living? I'm like, well, there's this way to get audio on the internet, and you can listen to. And then all of a sudden it became mainstream. And now then there was all these people in movies that, Steve Martin and Martin Short do my job on a TV series. It's kind of exciting. They do my job. That's cool. Well, I'm here to tell you, fellas.
Yes, I know exactly what you're
We've come out the other side. We've come out the other side. And now we've reached the place of oversaturation of the podcaster. There was this thing that happened in like the late 80s, late 90s, early 2000s, where every movie had to have like the nerdy computer guy.
The internet man.
Yes. Because the internet was such a crazy thing to introduce to a mainstream audience. They had to have the weird dude that lived in the basement that the main character had to go consult. And then they would say things like, say it again in English, please. That character is alive and well in today's cinema, ladies and gentlemen, but now it's a podcaster.
And it's done like, listen, my complaints about Only Murders in the Building, even more true here, because here's a podcaster who we were looking at his setup, his desk setup, his camera, or his microphone, way all over in the corner. He's podcasting. He's talking to his monitor way over in the corner. This is a guy who's producing content for the internet, going into Hollow Earth, going to like a once in a lifetime trip into the Hollow Earth, not recording anything. Not shooting any footage, not doing anything.
Well, he's shooting
footage on a mini DV camera.
It makes no sense at all.
None of this makes sense.
It is now podcaster is shorthand for exposition that we know you're bored by, but there's these weirdos that are super into it. So let's just throw this stock character that used to be the internet guy, and I'm sure there was a version before that of whatever it was, but it was ever thus, and now it is us. And I hated it in this movie.
Let's put an Oscar-nominated actor in that role too. Like, let's just really degrade this person of immense talent. To what you're saying, Jeff, like, I do think it really does come down to scale around the CG stuff, because I do remember seeing the Gareth Edwards Godzilla, and the trailers for that were fantastic. Like, they opened with like ominous chanting music and people skydiving and seeing Godzilla in the background, and scale was always what he sold. He even sold that really well in The Creator. I think that's one of the few things that worked in that movie. And Adam Wingard does not get the scale. He gets toys, right? So Godzilla versus Kong, I think they were more like action figures, and there's fun in that. I really enjoyed Kong using fighter jets like ninja stars. Like, that was fun. But again, that was topside, and you had stuff to like relate the proportion of like how big they were. You're right. When they go to Hollow Earth, we just kind of lose that.
It's completely gone.
And the CG itself is just not that great too. Like, it is weightless. Even Godzilla, when he is topside, moves too quickly. And also it doesn't make sense. Like, the amount of damage he does compared to what he is trying to solve. Like, again, I still don't understand how that balances out.
There's millions of people that meet their doom in this movie, and no one mentions a single word.
It's just Godzilla walking through town. Millions.
And we just saw Godzilla -1.
Yep.
We just saw this like perfect template of how you make both the effects of Godzilla compelling and overwhelming and immense and amazing, and the people having weight and matter and caring about their stories. Like, the movie did it, and here's this movie that I'm sure had a budget of 12 times as much.
Yeah.
And you could do it by making Godzilla the villain. Like, it's when Godzilla becomes the buddy is where the math just doesn't quite work out among this. How many innocents is he killing to just like recharge from a nuclear reactor or something?
Yeah. I actually wrote an entire blog post about this phenomenon you're discussing, Jeff Kanata, over at decodingeverything.com. About why doesn't it look right when they move around in this movie. And there's this video I saw by a YouTube channel called Kurzgesagt that explained why things are the size they are, right? And why things behave the way they behave, which is that, like, to give an extremely short version of it, as things get larger, their volume increases dramatically, but their surface area does not. And you need surface area, aka skin, to radiate out the heat that you're producing as a larger creature. So that's why when you have a massive creature like an elephant, that heartbeat its heartbeat's like 30 times a minute, as opposed to a chipmunk, which can beat like 350 times a minute, right? And we all understand this implicitly. Like, when we see chipmunk, his heart's beating and moving around real fast, like, we get it. We get why that's the case. And we also get why when there's a massive thing, it's moving super slowly. And the reason that Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire breaks your brain is because you have ginormous things moving super quickly.
Yes.
And that just doesn't make any sense. It's like, when you watch Gareth Edwards' Godzilla, you're watching creatures that were the size of apartment buildings move around, and their movements are deliberate and they're slow, and every movement is purposeful, because you only get a few if you're that big. And in this movie, they literally could be human-sized beings. Like, they literally could. They're like jogging, they're jumping. They're
Godzilla is jogging by the end.
Well, also because everything they're fighting is proportional to them.
Exactly. And you see, because they spend so much time on Hollow Earth, you see there's very little time. I'm going to say less than 5 minutes, where you see human, or maybe less than like 15 minutes, where you see humans in relation to these creatures,
or human constructions.
Right, exactly, yeah. And that is one of the biggest appeals of watching these movies, is like seeing those things interact with human structures, human beings. And that's where this movie is, I think, a huge miss, is because it is easy to go to a theater and watch CG things punching other CG things. That is easy to see. It's almost every other movie. But having creatures of this size and scale is a little bit rarer, when you're not watching Ant-Man increase to massive size in a Marvel film. Like,
well, he always moves very slowly too.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. And so
I think to put it even finer point on what you're saying is, I don't think Kong would have been as much a film icon if he hadn't been perched on the Empire State Building,
Yeah.
throwing planes, right? That's the image. The image isn't, hey, it's a big monkey, it's a big ape. It's oh my gosh, it's on something that we all know is enormous.
Yes, exactly.
There's that. I mean, everything Spielberg laid down in Jurassic Park just kind of is the template that a lot of big movies featuring big creatures should be following. And I don't know, what do we blame the Transformers movies to like make massive things that move too quickly? Like I think it is ultimately that, even though I like the first Transformers.
Well, I think this is an example of feature creep in a feature. Because it's like by the time we're at this movie, it's like, well, what do we got to get them? We got to up the ante. We got to up the ante. We got to up the ante, and to the point of ridiculousness. And it just nothing has any meaning anymore. Now we got to see him do all this crazy stuff, and like we got to see Kong, throw an axe onto the side of a cliff and scale down it like freaking, I don't even know.
He's in like SEAL Team 6 or something like that, basically, right? Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
But, hey, I do also want to acknowledge that these characters have had a long history. And, for many, many years, Godzilla was a dude in a suit fighting other dudes in suits. And and that also looked ridiculous in its own way, right? But I will say that was a lot more charming than what we're seeing here, right? There's a charm to the fact that you're seeing a physical human actually do the thing.
Yeah.
This movie, the action scenes don't work for me at all. The human characters are a complete waste. I will say the one character that I was like, oh, I really felt like this could have been interesting is exploring more Gia's relationship with Kong, right? That's a cool idea, is that this one character has a connection with this other massive creature that no other character can replicate. Of course, it's completely underserved in this movie. And instead we get a bunch of we get a bunch of Godzilla lore in this movie, a bunch of lore that happens, and a bunch of these kind of weightless action scenes. Dan Stevens is always cool. I'm going to be honest with you. I literally didn't remember that Rebecca Hall was a major character in this franchise.
Same.
She was
the major character.
Yeah, she was like one of the major main characters in Godzilla versus Kong.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, this movie was a miss for me, and I'm bummed because there was a lot of opportunity to make something that felt more weighty and substantive, and it seems like that wasn't taken. So
yeah.
Anyway, there's a few spoilers that I think are worth mentioning, so let's get to them. Spoilers for Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire starting right now. All right, let's talk about a few of the spoilers. First of all, they show up. I think it's a huge bummer to me that there was this relationship between Kong and this smaller giant ape called Suko, or I think his name is Suko. It's never said out loud or anything in the movie, as far as I can recall. And that was kind of interesting to me. I was like, oh, this could be cool. Very Planet of the Apes-esque.
Yes.
But it's like, this could be cool, but it's given so little time that I don't think it really has a chance to develop, unfortunately. We spend so much more time dealing with the humans and their pointless issues. But I did want to acknowledge, that's kind of a cool idea of King Kong having like a disciple. Also, we have no idea how tall that small ape is in relation to humans. That was also, that kind of sucked.
The scale is like, even if you're shooting something in an all CG creation, like Kong scaling down the cliffs, make the cliffs look bigger. Just pull back a bit so we can see a lot of this stuff. It's I don't know. It's the way they visualize Hollow Earth, I think, is also very empty. That kind of deals with a lot of this issue.
I agree. But anyway, they have. One thing I will say that's kind of cool about the movie is Mothra shows up. Mothra not in any of the promotional materials for this movie, so that's a cool little surprise. And Mothra kind of helped out a little bit, and I thought Mothra has a really cool design in this movie as well.
Yes.
So anyway,
at that point, it was like, who gives a shit?
Well,
they
were. We kind of. I think they were seeding the whole telepathic to Kong thing in the last movie. So it's like, I feel like that Mothra was in the original Godzilla movies. There were like telepathic kids, right, who were like calling Mothra. So I felt like that was seeded. It's a cool design, but they don't really do much with it. It's a shame. Like, I look at this movie,
comes in and helps out a little bit, and then that's it.
Well, he's like, "Hey guys, stop fighting. We had a whole other movie about this. You fought, and now we're supposed to work together. Don't forget." Godzilla and Kong just start fighting for no reason, as if they did not just try to. They had a big adventure a couple of years ago. Totally forgot that, I guess.
I think that the only part of the movie that I actually, well, that's not true. I think the very end with the gravity stuff was kind of clever and like could have been cool in an alternate version of this movie.
Yeah.
But I also, I do think, you know, Godzilla kneeing his way through the pyramids of Giza is a pretty cool image. You know, it's a waste in this movie, but I do think, hey, we've seen them smash through countless skyscrapers. Let's smash through something else that's iconic.
Well, he's sleeping like a cat in the Coliseum too, and every time he leaves, he destroys more of the Coliseum. It's more like Godzilla just doesn't give a fuck, right? Godzilla, like, he's like, I gotta deal with these big monsters. There are people in the way. You are like ants to me. I'm just gonna walk right
systematically going through all of the wonders of the world.
Yeah. The thing that was a real bummer was when Godzilla was swimming out of there, and he just started taking out those bridges with his little fins on the back.
Too
and I was
soon.
Just like,
too soon,
guys. I mean, those bridges take a lot of work to build. And
I wonder if there was any conversation of like the news right before this.
I'm sure. I'm sure there was conversation. It was like,
it's like, and the thing is, Godzilla, he didn't have to do that. He could have just swam a little bit lower, and then it would have been fine.
Godzilla just doesn't care.
He doesn't care. Godzilla, dude.
It's like, I was here before your puny civilization. I will be here after you are gone.
Yeah.
I just so hated the establishment of, you know, a Bizarro Kong and Bizarro Godzilla. And it just felt so obvious and lame the way we're going to have an evil Kong and an evil Godzilla for them to fight. And there was a moment before they introduced Scar or whatever dumb name he's got. I'm sure it's like something like Scar.
Scar King. Scar.
King,
yeah, of course it is. When you see him in silhouette, and there was that he had that, you know, that spine around his shoulders. When he comes walking out, and for a split second, I was like, "Oh shit! Is Godzilla X Kong? Is he like a hybrid Godzilla Kong bad guy? Was he like they mated and they created some weird ape lizard thing? That would have been." And he walks out, it's like, "No, it's just another."
You're right
ape
up my alley, though, Jeff. You want to see Godzilla and Kong mate? Like, you want that to happen. They
get it on. Anyway, I thought that was
here's my question.
Opportunity. It was all of the Planet of the Apes garbage, all of the stuff of like, hey, he's been looking for someone who else like him, and oh wait, they were right over here the whole time. It's so dumb.
Yeah,
so dumb.
It's a very it reminds you of this other movie series that is way better.
Way better.
And
in fact, there's a new movie coming, and maybe we should refresh ourselves on that.
Yeah, perhaps. The thing that I was curious about is they show up at Scar King's lair, and you find out he has enslaved a whole fleet of Kong-like apes,
and needs them to mine for some reason. I guess.
Like what? What is he doing? What are they doing? Why?
What are they doing?
What
it's
is
just
he
like
building?
the most
What is
boring,
he building?
The boring, obvious metaphor for subjugation. We'll have the mining shit. Why? Who cares? Mining seems oppressive. It's like no imagination whatsoever.
What were they building? Was it ever explained what he was building?
No, not at all.
He's not building anything.
Maybe he has that cool ass whip sword thing, which has the power to control the other, you know, Godzilla, the other.
Also not explained.
Not explained, but
that was kind of a cool idea.
That's a cool thing,
idea.
cool weapon.
And I thought that kaiju was pretty cool design and everything like that.
So I was thinking, like, they're just these subjugators? They were looking for more power, right? He's looking for more things like that, but the movie doesn't give us any of that.
Yeah. And then, of course, the Rebecca Hall and her daughter kind of decision at the end.
God.
Pretty.
Well, all of the stuff.
Jeff, I can't tell. Did you like this movie?
Sorry. All of the stuff about the secret Hollow Earth people that have been there and somehow manipulate gravity and don't talk but can communicate telepathically. It's a bad episode of Star Trek original series. You know,
that's what it is. Did you enjoy the Volkswagen ad, Jeff?
Yeah, I did. Let's get
that has been
perfectly
clipped perfectly. Literally an ad shot of that carpet that's been going around Twitter. I didn't know what they were talking about before I saw that clip. So like, okay,
yeah, it was.
I felt bad for Dan Stevens. I was like, what are you doing?
I feel bad for Rebecca Hall. I don't feel bad for Dan Stevens because he is having fun. Rebecca Hall does not get to have fun in this movie, unfortunately.
That's the thing with Rebecca Hall. I think she is such a talented actor, you know, and I feel like she has just appeared in movie after movie that has not made use of her skills. Like I want to say, like the last movies that I can remember.
Resurrection.
Yeah, Resurrection was great.
We talked about that.
We talked about that on the podcast. The Town, she was pretty good in The Town, even though that wasn't.
How far back are we going?
Pretty
that
far.
was 2010. I thought you saw it in The Gift. You know, the
Gift is good.
And also, I heard Night House was good. Basically, all her small movies are good. Like
all her small movies.
The small movies, she and then she makes a movie like Godzilla X Kong, probably so she can make the small movies.
She was great in Tales from the Loop, which not many people saw, but that was also fantastic. It's really, I mean, between Christine and Resurrection, like that is like what she is very good at.
Yeah.
Being the centerpiece of a large monster movie franchise, not so much. It's unfortunate.
She's fine in this. I don't think she's bad.
Fine.
It's just like
she's not bringing
nothing for her to do.
Yeah.
There's nothing for her to do in this movie other than, hey, my daughter is kind of not fitting in, and at the end of the day, we're still going to be together, and that's wonderful, you know. So
I gotta go talk to the podcaster because he'll know what to do about my daughter.
That's so true of life in general, you know. It's like when
amount
people...
of times people come knocking at my door while we're recording, and I'm like, please,
please,
I can't solve all your problems. I'm merely a podcaster.
My daughter is making drawings that look suspiciously like what high-tech seismic equipment is picking up.
Yes. Wait,
Which,
by the way, you need to travel from the Caribbean to Miami to show squiggly lines to any eye.
That was a stretch. That was a stretch, right? She drew 3 peaks. And look, there's 3 peaks in this thing. Like, I mean, okay, but like really? Also...
Are we really going to risk our life? Are we really going to risk our life on this hunch? Is that really...
He takes one look at it and he's like, yeah.
It's the same. Yeah, it's totally. The same thing. Yeah,
it's totally. The same thing. You know, it's the same thing of any 3 peaked. You know, any drawing of 3 triangles. It's not exactly the freaking. You know, I don't know,
Mona Lisa or
whatever.
Yeah. Anyway,
I can't think of it.
Rosetta
Stone. It's not the freaking Rosetta Stone.
Speaking of another reboot franchise, you know, with a podcaster, I still like what Carrie Coon was doing in Ghostbusters Afterlife and the new one. Not as much. She wasn't in as much, but she at least was bringing something to it. And I wish there was room for Rebecca Hall to be a little weird, be a little fun, be a little
that movie
flip.
franchise actually has a character named Podcast.
Yeah. Now he's just Cast.
How far
he's
come.
older.
Yeah. Wow. Progress, folks.
Progress.
Yeah. All right. At the end of the day, Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, not a movie that any of us particularly liked. A real missed opportunity. And I have to say,
there's going to be more of them.
Yeah, because this movie is a huge success. This is the thing. This is the thing, guys. This is what I struggle with on a daily basis: is my own creeping irrelevance in society. Because
creeping or sprinting?
Now dealing with because this movie is a massive success and people love it. It has an A- cinema score, and probably whatever the hell they did in this movie is probably the near, if not far, future for what this franchise is.
I mean, for the 8-year-old who is going to see it during the day, like, should be a lot of fun. I was half considering trying to go during the day and bring my kid. I was like, not yet. Maybe 8. She's currently 5, and the opening scene involves a massive fight and King Kong tearing apart the carcass of another giant animal.
That's true. He does bathe in its blood.
Does bathe in its green blood. It can't be red, but you know. Yeah. Do you want to shout out Junkie XL? I think does the score for this movie.
Score is
at
awesome.
Times.
The score is awesome.
At times, yeah, it leaps to life, especially when like the Dan Stevens stuff is happening.
Yeah.
Like at times it decides to just be 80s synth, and I'm like, oh, that's fun.
Yeah,
let's have more fun in this movie. Yeah,
love the score in this film. So anyway, all right. Well, despite everything we've just said, at the end of the day, it is really impressive that Adam Wingard made a movie. Thank you so much for watching this video of the Filmcast. Check out these other videos that we have available, and be sure to hit like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon to get other videos from us in the future.
You can also go to thefilmcast.com to catch all of our audio podcast versions of all of our episodes.
And support this podcast at patreon.com/filmpodcast, where you can sign up for ad-free episodes and exclusive After Darks.
Thanks so much to everyone who makes the Filmcast possible.